Welcome, everybody. My name is Ann Dolin, and I am your host this evening. Tonight, we're talking about college insider insights, what your 11th graders should do now to stand out in the admissions process. I love this topic. I've been through this with my kids. I've been through this with lots of kids in our company, and I cannot think of a better expert to share her insight on the college process than Kristin Landis. Kristin, thanks for being with me tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, Ann.
Kristin is a college consultant here with us at Educational Connections. She has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Richmond, and she has a law degree from Emory University School of Law. But when it comes to college admissions, she's done a lot. She worked at UVA for more than a decade as an evaluator. And there, she evaluated over 10,000 applications, both in-state and out-of-state students, and also international candidates. And on a day-to-day basis, Kristin, you mentioned last night, you were working with students on the West Coast till 11:30.
Yes.
You have students, especially seniors right now, all day long, helping them with their applications. So you've seen a lot, and probably the last 13 years. Tell us a little bit about where we are right now in the state of college admissions when it comes to the application volume.
Sure, absolutely. And we've talked about this numerous times over the last few years, you and I have, and it just doesn't seem to keep change. I mean, the college admissions landscape is always changing, but one thing that hasn't changed is the increase in applications. And this slide is very representative of that. The common application, which is accepted by well over 1,000 universities in the country, release these statistics that just shows this exponential increase in applications since 2019. And there are a number of reasons for this. One thing is the world went test optional, which during the pandemic, we all know that testing was difficult for a lot of people. And so most colleges went test optional. We'll talk a little bit about testing later on tonight, but that allowed students to cast a wider net and apply to more schools. Colleges have become much more well-versed of marketing themselves on the internet now that we live in a very virtual world. So students now don't necessarily have to go see a college to apply to a college to understand that that may be a place for them. Colleges have also made a very conscious effort to increase underrepresented groups. There's been a 61% increase in applications from underrepresented groups. So we're seeing this really high increase in applications.
And Kristin, let's drill down to some schools that are many students apply to. They're very popular, large state universities. Tell us what's happening there.
Yeah, I mean, this slide is just very indicative of the fact that a lot of the popular schools, and this is pretty much a cross representation for a lot of colleges, have just seen an exponentially a high increase in applications. When I was at UVA, I started, as you said, in 2010. We had about 24,000 applications. Last year, they had over 50,000 applications. So it just shows you this huge increase in applications. So then you ask yourself, okay, great. So we have this increase in applications. What does that mean? Well, that means that there are fewer slots for students. And so we're seeing acceptance rates go down. So for really highly selective colleges or even Ivy League colleges, whereas 10 years ago, they had acceptance rates in maybe the 10% range, you're now seeing that those acceptance rates are down in the 3 to 4% range. For the next tier college, where there used to be a 15 to a 30% acceptance rate, you're seeing an acceptance rate down in the lower double digits. So you're just seeing acceptance rates go down.
Kristin, that makes sense. We had a question from a parent. She says, is it that there are more applications or more applicants? Can you clarify?
There are a little bit of both, but it's really more applications. As I said, the reasons why, I mean, first, underrepresented groups, more applicants, but test optional, more applications is one of those reasons. And then just the fact that colleges are able to market themselves better.
Yeah, for sure. We used to see that kids would apply to like 6 schools. Now, what are you saying?
I have one student who was applying. I don't recommend applying to, I'll support you with however many schools you want to apply to, but 20 is a lot, but you are seeing students, especially because they're concerned because it is super competitive. So some students are applying to more and more schools. So you're seeing 12, 15, 17 schools. I'm not necessarily saying that's right for everyone, but you are seeing some students apply to more schools.
Thank you for that, Kristin. So it brings us to the question, if there are so many applicants, what are colleges looking for?
Right. That is the million-dollar question. What colleges are looking for in applicants? That hasn't changed. What I was looking for an applicant in 2010 is what colleges are still looking for now in an applicant. And what they're looking for is students. When I was at UVA, I was always asking myself, what will this student bring to my college environment? What contribution can they make both in and out of the classroom? What type of citizen, community citizen are they going to be? What type of impact are they going to have? That has not changed.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of brings us to the next question is schools are wondering, well, how is the student going to contribute to our university? How do they know that?
Right, exactly. So what colleges look for when they're looking to see what kind of citizen you're going to be, they're looking at a number of different characteristics in an applicant. And some of these are quite, obvious, but I'm just going to say them so that everybody understands. I mean, one of them, they're looking for an intellectual curiosity, a love of learning. Has a student taken the hardest classes available to them? Have they spent time outside of the classroom trying to enrich themselves in one way or another? They're looking for drive, initiative. Has that student taken a passion and pursued it to the fullest in something? They're looking for, and what we've talked about, the main thing, do they make a contribution in those communities that they are part of? Not everyone can be captain of the football team and president of the student body. There are lots of ways to make contributions, both formal leadership and informal leadership. Another thing colleges are looking for are perseverance. How does a student handle obstacles? Maybe a student has a learning difference. How have they worked and coped with that? Or a sports setback? What have they done with regards to that? And the last thing, which for me was an absolute non-negotiable, is having a social consciousness. Does that student give back in some way to some sort of community? So those are the characteristics that colleges are looking for when they're looking at applicants.
And I know that that's something you work with kids on. I think you saw the student wrote a Google review, and usually when if somebody writes a Google review, it's a parent. But this was a student who wrote it, and she worked with you.
Yeah.
And she said that you actually steered her in a different direction. You started with her, I think, as a sophomore or a junior.
I did. I started with her as a sophomore, and I mean, it was such a wonderful treat that she just did that out of the blue. It was such a surprise. So what happened is she's really passionate, a reader. She's a poet. She's really interested in English, and she's really interested in language. And so we were talking about her passions and her interests and thinking of ways to elevate that outside of the classroom. And I looked at her school's profile, and they didn't have an English honor society, which a lot of high schools do have. And so she and I talked about it a lot. We did some research, and she started a national chapter at her high school. She now has well over 100 members. They go to local elementary schools and they tutor students. They read to them. They tutor students at the high school. I mean, she's really just elevated it and grown this. And so, yeah, does that look fantastic on a college application? Sure. But what an incredibly enriching opportunity and experience for her. So that was great.
Yeah, I love that. And I bet without your guidance, she definitely wouldn't have gone in that direction.
Well, I don't think she even knew that the English Honor Society existed.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So that was just really serendipitous that we were able to do that. But when we talk about ways to contribute, and when I was looking at UVA, I was looking to see what a student's unique voice is, what their perspective is. And some students say, well, I don't know what my unique voice is. And I can appreciate that. I mean, as a young person, but everyone has them. And so just like with the student that you mentioned, Ann, we delved into her interests and then helped elevate that in other ways and show her point of view and show her perspective. And that's what I call your narrative. And that's what colleges are looking for. And you find that narrative in a couple of different places. And that's why tonight it's so great that a lot of younger students are here, because this is a time to start thinking about that narrative and elevating it in different places.
And I know you often tell your juniors, go request your transcript. Go get your transcript. Let's look at that together. Why is that important?
Absolutely. A lot of students don't even know that they can get their transcript. They get their report card, but they don't realize that that's not the same as your transcript. Your transcript is actually what the college is going to evaluate you on. And they look at your transcript after your junior year. It's cumulative. So your cumulative GPA of all the courses you've taken in high school. And that is the first thing an admissions officer opens is your transcript. And your transcript actually tells a story about you, which a lot of people don't realize. Looking at the type of classes you've taken, have you taken the hardest classes available? Are you super interested in STEM and are you taking the highest math? Or maybe how are you using your electives? If a student, let's say, is interested in architecture, have they taken those CAD drawing classes? Students who are interested in engineering, have you taken engineering classes? Or maybe you're interested in art. So those electives are really important, how you utilize them. And then also your program rigor, because program rigor, that coupled with your grades, are going to be the most important thing that colleges look at. And program rigor, it doesn't mean that you have to take necessarily all the hardest classes. If you can't do well in all of them, then you shouldn't be taking all of them. You need to be taking the classes that challenge you, but that you also feel that you can do well in. And not everyone can take, every subject the hardest classes. So maybe you take the hardest class in an area that you're interested in. Let's say hypothetically, you're a STEM student. So you take harder classes in math and science, and maybe take your foot off the gas a little bit in English. So that's what I'm talking about when looking at your transcript. First of all, you want to see what the colleges are going to look at. You want to see what that narrative is going to look like. And so getting that now is a really smart idea.
Yeah, for sure. I know that you also work with students on defining their interests and filling out that really important part of the Common App on their activities.
Exactly, yes. So the Common Application, which we talked about, is accepted by most universities. And so in there's an activity section in which you have 10 slots to discuss what you do outside of the classroom. And sometimes people think they need to fill out all 10. I'll tell them have to be filled out. I'm like, absolutely not. I can't tell you how many times when I was reviewing an applicant, all 10 were filled out and 6 through 10 was not really much of anything. It really is quality, not quantity. So things that you're super passionate about, that you really spend an inordinate amount of time in, that you've made an impact in, those are the activities that you should be putting on your Common App. And as you'll see in this slide, people will see they only give you 150 characters. That's not words, that's characters to tell what your impact is in that activity. That's not a lot of room. So it's very, very important how you utilize those characters. And so we have a couple of different strategies for how we utilize those when we do work out the activity section of the Common App.
I know that's really helpful to kids. All right, so if it's okay with you, I want to shift gears, Kristin, and
Sure.
talk about the essay.
Yeah.
There's multiple prompts. So I know you help kids pick the prompt that is going to highlight them the most, and then write to that. Tell us a little bit about how you go about it with students.
Sure, and this is a great time. I mean, 11th graders or even 9th or 10th graders, if they're on this evening, may say it's a little premature. Well, it's actually really not, because this is a wonderful time. Those prompts are available to everyone. They haven't changed in a bunch of years. So you can take a look at them. There's 7 of them. And number 7 is write whatever you want. But what they do is they get you thinking. Because nobody sits around and says to themselves, what's important to me? What am I, if I had to describe myself, how would I describe myself? These are questions that adults don't ask themselves. So that for young people to have to sit there and do this kind of really deep reflection, it's time consuming and it can be stressful. So starting earlier is a wonderful idea. I hate the word essay that, we all use it. I use it all the time too, but it's really a misnomer. This isn't an essay like you write for school. This is a personal reflection. This is a personal expression. It's telling a story is what it is. And so I have having read so many of these, I have kind of a recommended structure that students should use, but it's really a free game. It's how the student wants to express themselves. And so this is a wonderful time to start thinking about things. And when students say, well, I have no idea what I want to write about, my first questions to them are, what brings you joy? If you had a day to yourself to do anything, what would you do with that day? Or take me around your room. Let's look at the different things in your room and let's talk about them. And that helps generate ideas and thoughts to students about what is important to them, what are they passionate about. And so these are also really good exercises to start doing now, because what a lot of 11th graders don't realize, that come the spring, they're going to have to fill out a questionnaire for their guidance counselor. And that's because your guidance counselor has to write a recommendation for you. And there's a lot of really thought-provoking questions on that questionnaire. And it really gets you thinking about yourself and about essay ideas. So this is a great time to even start doing it, because a lot of schools, some of them schools, they're due before the end of the school year. So students don't realize that that's coming down the pike.
Kristin, there are a couple questions about the activities. One parent said, what do you do if you can't really define the activity? Like your child loves to read, and it's a big part of their life.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people, they don't have to be formal activities, like it has to be this club. You really can think outside of the box. I remember I had a student 2 years ago, and just like, I'm looking at your house, you're looking at my house. I was meeting with him and looking at his shelf behind him, and he had this really cool looking sculpture. And I said, what's that? And he goes, oh, that's my origami. I'm like, that is super cool. And he's like, yeah, I do origami art. I'm like, why are you just telling me this now? So he was an artist, like in his free time. He never even thought that activity could be part of his college application. I'm like, that is super compelling. So he had a whole entry about being an origami artist. I have lots of students who pursue different musical instruments in their free time. And you can put those in there. So, and if someone is a really thoughtful reader, maybe they talk about, the number of books they read in a year. Maybe they could segue that into going and working at the library as a volunteer, or helping a child learn to read in some sort of program in the community. So you can take passions and you can take them in different paths.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Kristin. All right, so let's shift gears again and talk a little bit about testing, because this has crept up, definitely in the last 2 years, but certainly even in the last 6 months, we're seeing a lot of changes.
We really are. I hate talking about testing probably as much as students hate taking testing, but it is really important. It was really important before the pandemic. It kind of went out the window with the pandemic. And now it's super important again. And for sure, there's a New York Times article that came out the beginning of last year, where a lot of really prominent admissions officers talked about that they feel that testing is one of the few barometers they can use to determine academic fit and readiness for their universities. So at EC, we have a philosophy, which you're going to go into because you're the expert on all this, about, we really give it our best shot. We really give it a go, because if you are a good test taker, it can really make a difference.
Certainly. And if you're kind of an average test taker, but you get prepared for it, you can do well. And I know we're also going to talk about creating a balanced list. It's so strategic now. It used to be, you took a test and it just went to all the schools on your list, but definitely not like that anymore. So we'll get into that. But let's start out talking about the differences between the two tests. And here's what's important to know. Schools do not have a preference. No school says, oh, I like the ACT better than the SAT. It totally doesn't matter. Your child can prepare for one test, put all their eggs in that basket, and take that one test. So they're not dividing their efforts or intent or their time, and just submit, for example, an SAT score or an ACT score. So let's dive into each one. First of all, you've probably heard that the SAT is now in digital form, and it's adaptive, meaning there's one module the student will take in both sections. Half of it's reading, half of it's math. Let's say the math section. They'll take the first module. If they do well on that, they're going to be given the next module that's more difficult. If they don't do well on it, they're going to be given some easier questions instead. That's the adaptive nature. It adapts based on how you do. So that's a huge change, the digital impact, and the fact that it's adaptive for the SAT. We consider the SAT a power test. So there are fewer questions on the test. Kids have to think deeply about the questions. Sometimes students will say, I don't know, on the SAT, sometimes I wasn't sure what they were asking me. So the difficulty in the SAT is in the interpretation and really analyzing the questions. And so again, important, half of the test is reading and writing and half is math. So it's something to consider if your child says, oh, math, oh, that's tough for me. The ACT is different. There's 4 sections, and only one of them is math. So if math isn't your strong suit, sometimes kids will shift to the ACT. Right now, the way it sits, the SAT in its digital format is 2 hours, and the ACT is 3 hours. But there are changes coming, which I'll talk about in a second. Right now, it's still a paper test. It's also considered a speed test, meaning you have to go at a pretty good clip in order to get done with a section. So there are more questions in the SAT, but they're actually shorter and they're definitely more straightforward. And kids will often say, oh, I understood these questions better. These are more like school. So the difficulty with the ACT right now, presently, is in its pacing, that you have to go at a pretty fast clip. And there are 4 sections in this test: English, math, reading, and science. In the science, you do not need to know chemistry, biology, physics. It's more like reading comprehension, where you look at charts and graphs, and you have to extrapolate information. So let's talk about those changes that are coming down the line for the ACT. They really, really want to compete with the SAT. They have lost ground because a lot of kids have jumped ship and said, oh, the SAT digital and shorter, let me go there. So the ACT is like, wait a second, hold on. We're going to make some changes too. Our test is only going to be 2 hours. And guess what? We're not going to put pressure on you like that adaptive stuff over there. It's okay if you don't do well on the first section. You're going to get the same test as everybody else. We're not going to make it adaptive in nature. They've also made another big change in that they're allowing more time per question. So fewer questions, but more time for each one in shorter passages. Same 36-point scale, but now the composite score is going to be English, math, and reading, and you do not have to take the science section if you don't want to. They also said, I was on a call with an organization I'm a part of, and one of the executives at ACT said they're also going to come out with a STEM score, which is math and science. So this new test is in September of next year. And you might think, oh, I have a junior, it doesn't matter. But it could, because a lot of times kids will take tests their junior year, but sometimes they'll say, you know what, I didn't get the best score I think I could get. Let me try again. And so this September test could be a really nice option just to throw it in there and see how you do. And the reason it's important to take tests a couple of times, not just for that reason, but you'll also get a super score. And that means that, let's say you take the test twice. The software that colleges use will cherry pick your best section for each test and create a new composite score. And so that's what colleges will see. They won't see all your testing, they will see your super score. So it's something to consider too. So these are the upcoming dates for the SAT and ACT. And when we work with kids on test preparation for this test, first we help them determine which test is going to be their most favorable one. Some kids, about a third of kids, score better on one test than another. But for the rest of the kids, it's kind of a toss-up. It comes down to personal preference. We help families make that decision. We help them prep for the test of their choice. And then we help them decide when they're going to take the test. Dates should always be paired. You need to have a strategy. Don't just say, oh, I'm going to take it on this date and see how I do. You want to pair dates by picking one date and then another after that. So for example, for the SAT, maybe you pick the December 7th and the March 8th date. So you prep until December 7th, you get your score back about 2 weeks later, you look at your score, you prep again in January, February, and you take it beginning of March. That's called paired test dates, and you can take it again later. But generally, kids will take it the fall of their junior year And we also recommend definitely the spring of their junior year as well, because statistically speaking, this is typically your best sport. You're older, you're more mature, and you have more curriculum under your belt. So if we can help you make these decisions and prepare your child for a test, we're happy to do so. We've been doing this for many years, and you can scan this QR code or just go to our website at ectutoring.com/test-prep, and you can see about our offerings for both tests, and we are happy to help you. All right, Kristin, anything I left out about testing?
No, I think you covered it, but you're right. We definitely, testing strategy is one of the main things that we're doing right now with our juniors.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Okay. So let's go back to kids and what they're looking, because we talk a lot about what colleges want, but what about what kids want?
Yeah, exactly. So that's the other part of our work. The first part of our work is helping elevate that student, identifying their interests, their narrative. And the second part of our work, which students probably feel maybe the more fun part of the work, is an ongoing conversation of talking about what they want in a college experience. And a lot of times students are like, I have no idea. So sometimes we just start from ground zero. If you had to think of your college, how do you foresee spending your weekends? What's important to you? I had one student, she said to me, I will not go to any school in Pennsylvania. I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure why, but if that's one of your criterias, okay. And then I had another student, I mean, obviously, that's just kind of taking it to an exaggeration. Another student said, I really love pretty libraries. That's really important to me. I said, okay. So we identified schools because she spends a tremendous amount of time in the library. I have other students who say, I'm really into nature. I want to be able to go out and take hikes and runs and other things. I call it, what is your ski slope? And I say that because I've had students in the past where skiing's been important to them. And you say, come on, Kristin, nobody's going to pick a college based on skiing. Well, sure, of course you're not. But if that's something that's important to you and you're going to be somewhere 4 years, it's something to consider in terms of your overall college experience. So we do a lot of conversations about from that part of, what do you foresee in that experience? And then the other part is the academic part, which is what you're there for in the first place. What do you think you may want to major in? Sometimes students don't know that, and that's okay. Let's talk about some of the classes that you really enjoy. Let's look at these colleges and see what they offer. So looking at schools from an academic perspective, but also from an outside of school perspective. And it's an ongoing conversation that we have, and it's never too early to start. I know that we have a lot of juniors on tonight. It's really, you should start now if you haven't yet. If we have 9th, 10th graders, it's also a wonderful time to start. I have plenty of 9th and 10th graders that I work with in which we have this ongoing conversation. And if you live in an area that has colleges near you, go visit one. You may not think that that's a school you want to go to, but just seeing the size, is it in an urban environment? Is it in a rural environment? Big, small, cold, hot, whatever that is, identifying those different criteria that you're looking for in a school. So that's our ongoing conversation that we have.
And all that information helps students to develop and refine their list.
Yes, definitely. So as we have this conversation, we provide a suggested college list. We cast a wide net initially, especially since students are still taking courses and their grades are not in, their testing is not in yet. So we look at schools now. Our focus is on schools that what we call are a match, which are meeting those criteria that you're looking for in a school. What size classes do you want? Do you want smaller classes, bigger classes? And we look at different criteria with regards to the school to make sure that that's the match for them. And then as we proceed along, especially by the spring of junior year, when we really see what academic performance is looking like, we start identifying the schools as a fit, which means seeing those schools that they fit their academic profile. Because when you make a list, you want, a lot of people hear that buzzword, oh, we need to compile a balanced list. And people go, well, what does that mean? Well, that means having schools that fit into the different buckets. And that is target schools, schools where your GPA and testing, if you choose to submit, if you kind of fall right in the wheelhouse of the students who are accepted to that school. We're safety schools, I call them most likely, because this isn't an exact science, in which your GPA and testing, if you submit, is higher than kind of the average of the students who are accepted there. And then reaches, where your GPA testing, if you choose to submit, is maybe a little lower. And if you're applying to a school that has a low acceptance rate, which is anything down in the low double digits, it's a reach for everyone. So making sure that you have a balance in each of those buckets. And as we started this evening, we were talking about how many schools should you apply to. That really is an individual basis. If students and parents and families do their research, that list should be somewhat more contained. I say to my students, I don't want any school on that list that you wouldn't go to that school. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your money to be applying to a school that you have no interest in attending. So really doing that research and starting now is super important.
I know you're also so good about helping kids find these schools that they would have never thought of or they would have never applied to.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning that, because the same 20 schools are on everybody's tongue. And are they great? Absolutely. But there are lots of schools out there that people don't even think about that have some of the best programs in the country. People may not realize if you're interested in musical theater, University of Cincinnati, Elon have some of the best programs in the country. If you're interested in other things, there are other schools that people don't realize have really, really strong programs. If you want to go into a co-op program, everybody's heard of Northeastern, but they haven't heard about Drexel has the exact same thing. So really doing your research and opening your perspective that there are a lot of schools out there that could be great fits for you, because college is what you make of that experience.
That's for sure. Thanks for that, Kristin.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we talked about refining the list. What about going on college visits?
Right. So I mentioned that briefly earlier, but super important to go. I mean, nothing replaces actually going to a school and seeing it. If you can see it in session, fabulous. I know people are super busy and it's also, it costs a lot to go see schools. That's why I'm saying just go even around your area just to see. If you live in the DC metropolitan area, there are a lot of schools that you can go see at different environments, small, big, in the city, out of the city. Start thinking about your year, planning it ahead. If you do have long weekends, start going to go see some schools. There's also schools that factor what's called demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest is exactly what it says. Schools factor whether you're interested in them, because colleges are what they hold very valuable to them is their yield rates, which is how the percentage of students that actually come to their school that apply. So they want students who are really interested in them. That's why early decision, which is a big thing, buzzword that a lot of people have heard about, has become super, super popular. So going to go visit a school shows that demonstrated interest as well. Not all schools factor it. That's also why research is important, but it's one thing to also consider. So planning out your year, and it's never too early to start looking at schools. I have 9th graders who spent the summer going and looking at a college or two. And we were already starting to working on that list. I hated that school. Okay, great. Knowing what you don't want in a school is just as important as knowing what you do want in a school.
Kristin, what about the countdown for the applications? Tell us a little bit about the timeline.
Right. So since we're specifically geared to 11th graders tonight, the countdown is what you should be doing now until this time next year. Right now, I'm sure many people know seniors, and they are in the throes of it right now. First application deadlines are starting October 15th. I already have students who've been accepted to schools who have rolling admissions. So it's already begun, and people don't realize that it's only October 1st, but it's already well in the throes of things. So what people should be doing right now is, first of all, that testing strategy that you talked about earlier, Ann. Just as you framed it about thinking of that pairing through this junior year and into the summer, developing that testing strategy. We do that with our students. The other thing that we do is we draft a resume. People realize, what do I need a resume for? I'm only in high school. Well, you do need a resume. First of all, it gets you start thinking about what you do, but it also, when we talked about that guidance counselor and that recommendation, teachers have to write recommendations for you as well. Guidance counselors actually ask you for a resume. So we start now drafting it while we have more time and we can put some real thought into it. Then when we have teacher recommendations, we provide them with our resume, because they may know how great you are in the classroom. They may not know all the great things you do outside the classroom. So we provide them with that resume. So we build a resume now. The other thing that we do is that ongoing conversation that we talked about, but developing that list, talking about what you want in a college experience. For all my students, I want their core list by the end of July, because we spend the summer already doing a lot of the work. So our core list by the end of July after their junior year. So that conversation. The other thing is thinking about those teacher recommendations. Come spring, students should already be asking their teachers for recommendations, those 11th graders, because you want to secure the teachers that you want. So we ask in the spring. So thinking about that now already, do I have a good relationship with that teacher? Oh, I really am interested in going into STEM. So I really should be having a science teacher. Let me think about my teachers. And one of those teachers needs to be an 11th grade core teacher. So it's really important to establish those relationships with your teachers this year. Come January, we talk about course mapping. We talked a lot tonight about the importance of the transcript, those courses that you take, making sure you're taking the appropriate rigor. Your 12th grade year is not the 12th grade year that when I went to high school, and probably when you went to high school as well, Ann, in that we thought that that was kind of your, slack off year, senior slump. No, your senior year should actually be your most rigorous year of all 4 years. So making sure that program looks the way it should, because colleges look at those courses. So planning your courses. And then come spring, we talked about teacher recommendations, doing those guidance counselor questionnaires. And a lot of times teachers have their own questionnaires that they want students to fill out so for them to write their recommendations. And then as soon as school gets out, we start. We get the entire Common App done during the summer, including activities, essay, the whole thing. We just have more time. And then we start working on those college-specific applications.
I was just going to mention, Kristin, that I really love that approach of starting early, because it seems to me that in this process, there's two types of students: the ones that are controlled by the process and the ones that control the process.
Right.
And by starting early, you're in charge. You are able to control the process and make it a lot less stressful.
100%. I mean, our philosophy is that we empower our students. I always say to my students, this is your journey. Your parents have been on theirs. I've been on mine. This is yours. You're driving this train. And so I have my students set their deadlines within the guise of my overall umbrella of completion, because I want them to take ownership of them. I want them to feel just what you said, Ann, in control of the process. And you'll see now, for people who have senior friends, that they know that, as I said, senior year is a lot of work. So you've got your courses, you've got your activities, maybe you've got a leadership role now that you're a senior, and then you've got college application stuff that you're doing regardless. There's a lot of admin work and balls in the air at this time of year. And so getting as much done over the summer is really important.
Yeah. And I know you put together a checklist to help everybody out. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so we put this together last year. We updated it for each grade, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So as I said, it's never too early to start. You see that we already have things going for our 9th graders. We start building a resume in 9th grade already with my 9th graders. We start talking about that college experience. And then all the way up through 10th and then 11th, we've talked about kind of the application process for this year. And then obviously for 12th, this is 100% go time right now in terms of getting applications in.
Thank you for putting that together, Kristin. I know that having somebody on the student side can make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is a daunting process, and just that there's so much involved, and it really is a team effort. At EC, we see this as a family effort. I always say team Ann or team Kristin when I talk about my student, because it really is. We're here for the parents as well as we are for the students. I spend a lot of time speaking with my parents, sometimes a little more than even students at times, because it really is. There's just a lot to it. And if you get financial aid involved and other kinds of things in school, each high school has different procedures for getting transcripts. I mean, there's lots of stuff. So we're here to support you through that process. We take it one step at a time. As I said, we let our students lead the process because we feel like we need to empower them, but we also guide them every single step of the way. And it can be super stressful and daunting when you say, I don't know what I'm interested in. I don't know what school I want to go to. I don't know any of this. And that's okay. I say to my students, I'm already in my blah, blah, blah 50s. And I definitely sometimes don't know what I want to do with my life. And that's okay. College is about exploration. But we can help you through this process and get you someplace where you can have that right environment to explore.
Kristin, can you talk a little bit about those kids that somebody asked us at the very beginning? One of my kids knew exactly what they wanted to do at the age of 4, but the other one isn't so sure. And I'm kind of getting worried. Should I be worried?
Yeah.
Kids come to us and they're like, I'm just average. There's nothing special about me. which is totally not true. How do you
It,
help them uncover what is unique about them?
yeah, I mean, that totally breaks my heart when I hear a student say that, because everyone has something that's unique about them. A lot of students just don't realize that, oh, just because I create origami art, I didn't know that that was special. I mean, that's just the example we talked about earlier. There's tons and tons of examples out there. But so one of the things we do at EC is we have kind of a small, it's not super hard. We don't want it to be daunting for students. We do like a modified Myers-Briggs program, a module for them. It's kind of fun to see what type of personality they are. And then we also do, we have another assessment that shows what type of learner they are. And it provides different career choices that kind of go aligned with what type of learner they are. And that also goes with their interests. We also have other ways to talk about interests, as I said, super informal, so students don't feel pressured in terms of, like, what do you like to do? Let's talk about it. And sometimes, I just like to play video games. Okay, well, what kind of video games do you like to play? You just got to needle a little bit, and then you end up finding other things. And then, hey, why don't we think about doing this with that? And sometimes it just takes a fresh set of eyes to see that students really, there's a lot out there that they could be doing, or that they're already doing that they don't realize is really neat.
I love that. I love seeing kids' faces light up when they realize, oh, I never thought about that. That always feels good.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so Kristin, I know we have a number of questions in Q&A, and I'm going to get to those in a second. If parents out there, you have a question, please throw it in the chat. I did want to mention, as Kristin said, we help kids as young as 9th grade. So current 9th and 10th graders, we have a program for you. 11th graders, that's where you are now. We work with kids. We have 5 college counselors, including Kristin, that work with juniors, and obviously also seniors. And you can learn more about our program at ectutoring.com/college-consulting. And we're also happy to chat with you about it. We talk to parents all day long, and you can schedule a call by scanning the QR code, or you can just go to our website, as I mentioned, and there's a drop down, and you can just schedule a 20-minute call. Even if, we'll share with you, we'll ask lots of questions about your child, what's going on. We'll also share information on our services, strategy calls. So even if you decide not to, use us, you will get some really great nuggets, a lot of what Kristin shared tonight, and they will help you on your journey with your child through college. Thanks, everybody, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.